top stories. And first up, millions are hooked on Pokemon Go, and apparently we are. It's our third day talking about it.
Yep.
The number of players closing in on Twitter users in the U.S. The National Security Council issuing an advisory. This is big news as concerns are raised about the impact this new obsession may be having on us all. Dr. Michael Frazier, clinical psychologist, joins us now. And we have been talking about this for many days because we see how many people are doing it. We see it all around on the country here. What kind of impact? Because we hear from people who say they are truly obsessed with this, that they have been doing it nonstop, doctor.
Well, I think a couple of things are important to keep in mind with games like this. First of all, this is a kind of game that involves collecting things. Obviously, it involves collecting the Pokemon. And in games like this, what's important to understand is that we're finding that the brain actually transmits dopamine to the pleasure centers of the brain, which makes this a very pleasurable experience. So when somebody finds the treasure, there obviously is a very pleasurable sensation when they do that. This keeps them coming back. The game developers absolutely know this, and that's why they've developed games like this. Their job is to get as many people playing the game as possible, and not just that, but to keep them coming back and to keep them playing the game and continuing to collect. One of the things that we definitely feel is that these games should be monitored carefully, and when a person finds that they're playing the game excessively, understanding when they need to say no and when they need to turn the game off.
A surprise roadblock this morning for drivers in the Twin Cities.
Around 7:30, dozens of protesters stood together on southbound Interstate 35W at the Mississippi River Bridge. Traffic backed up for miles until the protesters were eventually arrested.
Ashley Roberts saw this all firsthand. Good afternoon, Ashley.
Allie, things are back to normal on 35W after this morning's protest shut down traffic for almost 2 hours. Community members are demanding justice in the death of Philando Castile, the St. Paul man shot and killed by police last week. While the investigation continues, protesters made it clear their efforts will not stop. Early Wednesday morning on the 35W bridge, rush hour traffic stops and a protest begins. A coalition of non-black allies, as they call themselves, shut down the southbound lanes in support of the Black Lives Matter movement.
These white people understand that we're going through something. Black people are going through something in this country, and they want to fight to make a difference, and I think that's beautiful.
Victims were slumped over everywhere, and one man said it looked like a scene from a zombie movie. The scene unfolded Tuesday morning, July 12th, in the Bedford-Stuyvesant section of Brooklyn. Resident Brian Arthur live-streamed victims being attended to by police and paramedics. CBS 2 reports a total of 33 people were hospitalized. K2, or spice, is made of spraying plant leaves with various chemicals made in China. K2 costs about $5 a pack and is usually sold out of bodegas.
Once upon a time, there was a safe welfare state called Sweden. This beautiful part of Sweden that we call Skåne is where my forefathers lived as long back as I have been able to research, the beginning of the 18th century. Now, Sweden has turned into Absurdistan, a country that has one of the highest number of reported rapes in the world. Hundreds of so-called exclusion areas, more than 55 no-go zones where police and ambulance get stoned, and Sharia law is becoming more important than Swedish law. Even though it's forbidden to keep statistics on the rapist's ethnic background or religion, we know who is behind the near 1,500% increase of rapes in Sweden. Almost every day we can read in the so-called alternative media about rapes against Swedish women and girls committed by asylum seekers or other migrants from the third world. Up until a few decades ago, no one had heard about gang rape. Now it happens every week.
Turning the focus on alleged kidnapping and torture in Egypt of hundreds of students, political activists, protesters and even young teenagers during the past 3 years. That's at the heart of a report from Amnesty International. A demonstration in Rome, organised by the charity, sought to highlight how people vanished without trace after security forces raided their homes. In some cases, Egyptian police have been prosecuted. Last Tuesday, 6 officers were sentenced to between 3 to 7 years in jail for torturing and killing a prisoner. The report is based on the fate of 17 kidnapped and tortured people who were denied access to their lawyers and families. It states many of those abducted have been held for months at a time. Often, it alleges, they have been kept blindfolded and handcuffed for the entire period. Some of them, says Amnesty International, have been beaten, given electric shocks and suspended by their limbs.
Anti-mafia police have broken up a human trafficking gang in central Romania. 3 men and 2 young boys were initially found chained up and rescued by police during searches of the homes of suspects. Around 50,000 euros were also discovered, along with a kilo of gold. By the time the operation had finished, at least 40 victims had been recovered. Many claimed to have been beaten, fed scraps of food and forced into manual labour or fighting for entertainment. As police began arresting suspects, most denied knowing anything about it. More than 90 suspects were eventually taken into custody. Investigators say many of the victims had been held for over 8 years. They were all vulnerable young people, some with mental and physical disabilities, who'd been forced into slavery.
4 employees at the Hanford Nuclear Reservation in Richland, Washington, have reported possible exposure to vapor, according to an article just posted on CBSNews.com. This brings the total amount of possible exposure reports by workers there to 55 just over the last several months. Both employees were cleared to return to work, but they reported smelling a chemical substance. Other employees have complained of respiratory issues, but all have been cleared to return to work after they were given oxygen bottles when working near the underground tanks. The tanks are double-walled, although some of the older ones only have one wall of protection from plutonium waste product.
According to sources, Russian authorities detained and then deported board chief Jeff Shell, who oversees U.S. government broadcasting overseas, including The Voice of America and Radio Free Europe. This is the latest move amid heightening friction between Washington and Moscow. The Broadcasting Board of Governors said in a statement that its chairman, Jeff Shell, was denied entry into Russia on arriving at Moscow's main international airport late Tuesday, despite having a valid U.S. passport and Russian visa. He was detained in a locked room for several hours before being escorted onto a flight to Amsterdam.
I believe the Congress has a constitutional responsibility and a moral obligation to confront the Zika virus. It is my hope that today's hearing will further call attention to the seriousness of this situation and what more we can do in the Western Hemisphere to help fight.
Some disturbing Zika news here in the U.S. Utah health officials say an elderly patient who was infected with the virus has died. While the exact cause, they say, is unclear, this does mark the very first death related to Zika right here in the continental U.S.
We are the front door to the Zika virus. I don't want it here. I want to close that door.
Key West is the end of the road. It has always attracted very independent-minded people, and they don't particularly like being told what to do.
No other technology out there can control this mosquito to this effect.
This is not a silver bullet. This is just another tool in the toolbox.
The World Health Organization declaring a global health emergency.
They now expect the virus transmitted by mosquitoes, of course, could reach farther north to 30 states now.
We're going to get the latest now in the battle against Zika.
The CDC says the virus has been linked to birth defects.
Scientists hoping to use a new weapon, genetically modified mosquitoes.
They're hot about this here. They're dead set against using this neighborhood in an experiment.
They're trying to jam this down our throat without our consent.
And they're warning that your neighborhood could be next.
Today, the Lincoln-Lancaster County Health Department launched a full-scale Ebola training exercise. The idea is to make sure that local hospitals are prepared for the absolute worst. The exercise simulated a couple who traveled to Sierra Leone and returned with Ebola symptoms. The couple was split up and sent to CHI St. Elizabeth's and Bryan Health West campus. It was an effort to keep from overwhelming one facility.
We've all internally done training and exercises related to the being able to accept these types of patients. And today was just sort of the end, the culmination of all of those things we've been doing over the last year and a half to prepare.
All of the healthcare and disaster relief organizations on hand today said the exercises like these drive home the point that regardless of affiliation,
They share the responsibility of keeping those in Lincoln safe.
A ticking time bomb may be lurking underneath South Asia. At least that's according to new research that suggests tension is growing in a fault system beneath Bangladesh, the most densely populated nation on the planet. In the journal Nature Geoscience, the study's authors say using GPS data, they found evidence of increasing strain where two tectonic plates meet. They note that it's a subduction zone where one section of the Earth's crust is slowly thrusting under another. This is the kind of plate boundary responsible for the planet's most devastating quakes. If their models are correct, the researchers say the fault is stuck and has been under stress for 400 years. They think it's capable of unleashing a magnitude 9.0 quake, that is, if the fault ever gives way. Lead study author, geophysicist Michael Steckler says, quote, "We can't say it's imminent or another 500 years, but we can definitely see it building." For News.